Welcome to Talent Matters, the podcast where talent, skills and determination take centre stage. I'm your host, Donal O'Donoghue, and each episode we dive into the world of applying talent in various aspects of life. Whether it's careers, sport or creative, Talent Matters explores how the right mix of talent, skills and grit can propel us towards achieving our goals. Join us as we uncover stories, insights and strategies from a diverse range of guests who have tapped into their talents to create remarkable achievements. This podcast is brought to you by Sanderson, a leader in global talent solutions. Ray Goggins is a former Special Forces Operative with the Army Ranger Wing. He's well known as Chief Instructor on Special Forces Ultimate Hell Week and as a best-selling author. In this episode, he shares his experiences from his time in the Army, transition to civilian life, and his insights on leadership and training. Let's get into it.
How are you, Ray?
Don, good to see you again.
Good to see you. Great. Thanks for doing this. This is obviously the Talent Matters podcast, and the conversations that we're having are all about that connection between talent and skill and grit with people that have interesting lives and interesting careers, and you've had one of those.
My current career isn't great. I'm joking. No, it is. Yeah, look, I suppose it wasn't the norm, I guess, but a lot of the things you're talking about, your three topics, kind of were threaded through all of it at different stages. Where sometimes it's your natural talent will get you through something, or your natural ability. Then your created skills that you've learned will help, and then underwriting all that is the grit.
Grit's the big thing, isn't it?
For me, it's the baseline.
So when you go back to before the military, and you go back to the kid you were growing up when you were in school and secondary school, what were the kind of talents, and what were the kind of things that you gravitated towards?
Yeah, I grew up in the north side of Cork City, so youngest of a large family. So hurling was the all-important thing, which I was brutal at. I was a terrible hurler. Wanted to be great, I was rubbish. So my kind of thing was swimming, and my thing was running, but more so swimming from a very early age. I always felt a comfort in water, and we lived very close to a corporation pool that I used to go so often that I would get in for free, and the staff would let me in on my own. So I'd spend hours over there on my own, like just swimming. Just swimming and that was my thing. I just loved water. Just something about it.
And what about school? What were you like in school?
Yeah, I was middle of the road. I was never the smartest or brightest. I was quite lazy. Studying-wise, really lazy. I was probably a lot brighter than my results would say.
Or probably a lot brighter than the traditional rote learning school system brings out of people, because it's a certain type of person that'll do well.
I agree, and I wasn't I actually had a very good memory. And the memory test side of it wasn't an issue. For me, the issue was I had no I didn't feel the reason why I should be studying so hard for something I didn't like doing. It was a Christian Brothers school as well. It was pretty robust back in the 70s and 80s. And and again, it was hurling based school. I wasn't into that side of things, So I never again, I was just very grey, bland, middle of the road, never in trouble. Never too good, that kind of way, So.
And what did you think when you were in school? What did you imagine you'd do as a
soldier?
It was always on the radar, was it?
Because I always believed, and that's the one thing, I always believed that's what I would end up doing. And I had no doubt that that's what I was going to do, no matter what. I didn't want to be an engineer, I didn't want to be a doctor, I wanted to be a soldier, and that was it.
And when was the first chance to apply, or what was the process like to join up?
I suppose for me, I made a deal with my mum that I'd do my leaving cert, which I did. And I joined up when I was 18, so I left school at kind of 17, spent a year working on a building site, and then went straight into the army as soon as I could, once I was old enough. So that was it for me.
And did you know it was your thing when you...
I found a comfort to it. I mentioned about the water thing there. For me, the army, I was made for it. I was made for the military and that style of life, because I had done some other things. I did some martial arts when I was younger as well. And that discipline and that kind of habit, routine, even the team part of it, I really took to very, very quickly. I really enjoyed it.
And we were only talking about this earlier on because Bernard, who owns Studio 44, is one of the co-directors of Studio 44. I know him for a long time because we were involved in martial arts, obviously, when we were young. But a lot of the skills that come with that, in terms of, even like, I remember being, 16, 17 years of age, and you're, teaching classes, organizing people, organizing trips to go places, and it gives young people, I think, a lot of structure and that respect and that determination for people that stick with it and progress. There's something very powerful in it. And
no, I agree. And what I took out of, say, the martial arts side of things is that discipline. And that, putting the time in, understanding that you have to put the work in to get the results. And sometimes the process is as important as where you're going with it,
Yeah.
And I love that side of it. My brother-in-law, who was my trainer, my master, he was just very unassuming, no ego. It's just about effort all the time. And that really kind of resonated to me. It's something I always kind of looked at then. Yeah. And it was like almost my yardstick for people that I would be drawn to as leaders, as commanders of mine, as, like colleagues, people who work like that. They're not too fond of themselves. Yeah. And they just get on with it.
Yeah. I remember my dad brought me, because my dad did a bit of martial arts for a while back in the 80s when everybody was doing martial arts, and we were looking for a club for ages. And eventually he brought myself and a couple of my mates up to the local taekwondo club, which was growing. And I remember after the first training session, I came out and he said to me, do you think you'll stick with it? And I thought it was such a strange question, like for me, the minute I walked in there, I knew it was my thing. And I said, I love everything about it. I love, the sounds, the smells, everything. I said, what is that smell? And he just looked at me and he said, that's the smell of sweat and feet. I was like, I love it. Yeah. That's my thing,
Yeah, that's the smell I've had all my life. Yeah, so I can relate to that. Though.
So anyway, going back to the, when you joined the army, what was the path from, I suppose, getting started to then seeing that there was the potential to move into the Special Forces side of things, or the Army Ranger Wing?
Yeah, so again, I was quite young, starting 18, went straight into it. Round peg, round hole, everything about it just resonated to me. It just felt good all the time. I loved the work rate. I loved the madness of it as well. Having to get up at 5 a.m. and out like cleaning stairs with a toothbrush as a punishment or something. I understood why I was getting this done to me, for discipline. So I spent 9 years in the regular army. So I stayed in an infantry battalion in Cork, where my father had served and I had a brother serving there. It was great. I loved it. It was like one of the happiest times of my career, because it was innocent. It was, educational. Every day is a school day. The crack was great. The slagging was great. I deployed overseas 4 times to Lebanon in the 90s. It was pretty hairy in patches. I was trained to be a junior leader. I became a fitness physical training instructor, all that kind of stuff. But the Ranger Wing was something I heard about. I didn't really know about it joining up at 18. I heard about it when I was in, and you'd see them from time to time in different parts of the country or in barracks, and they were always kind of quite aloof and very kind of, there was like some sort of like a menace or something about them. I don't know the right word, and they were always just doing their own thing. Now, they were quite friendly to chat to you if they were around, but something about them. So I kind of, okay, I'll try this out. So I actually, very early on in 92, I did my first selection course with no preparation.
So how old were you back then?
I was 20, 21. So
yeah.
I was old enough, but I was old enough. Physically, I was super fit, but I had the talent. I had the skill, but I didn't have the grit at the time, which I found out to my detriment. So a couple of weeks into the course, I quit.
So what was the moment? What was that the point where you just felt?
I can't. I'm not.
There's no northern.
Yeah. A couple of weeks in, my fears, what broke me on the whole thing was I was fit enough. I had all the kind of the right kind of tools to do it. I just didn't know how to access them at the time. I didn't believe in myself enough, which is the big one. I didn't see myself getting to where I needed to be. I never kind of played it in my head. Okay, this is where I'm going with this. So I just said, I'll see how it goes.
Yeah.
Which is like tantamount to disaster.
Yeah.
So that was the first thing. Second thing, I worried about everything. Stuff I couldn't control. I worried about what will they make me do now? What will they make me do next week? What if? And any kind of strength I had was being undermined. So I was just totally worried.
It's the fear of the unknown as well.
Absolutely. Like there's nothing you can do about that. I learned down the line. So they kind of ate me up. And I quit. So went back to the regular army, got dogs abusing the lads, which is how they cope with trauma with you, which is great. Kind of, went on, got promoted and did all these things. But it was always there that I want. Like I knew I wasn't, like I was the top 1% in my unit, and I was good at all this army stuff because I was born for it, as I said. But there was just something more I needed. Like, so I went back, but I built myself up to go back.
Tell me about that. So what did you do? Because I'm thinking about this stuff quite a bit because, as you know, as part of the podcast, we're talking to yourself, we're talking to people that have done extreme stuff, you know, like whether adventurers or whatever. And sometimes a lot of the grit and the mental preparation comes through building the physical capability. So what did you have to do? Was it mental or was it?
Yeah, it was a combination of all the above. So I physically, obviously, I trained myself, but I trained myself to deal with what I call chaos, as in, I would have other friends in my unit who would, in the infantry, would set up a training morning for me. So a surprise event that I knew nothing about. They just hit me with it and I have to do it. So that means I'm not ready for it. I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
I have to deal with it. So what does that do for you? When you do that enough times, it just becomes your norm then. You don't worry about it coming up.
Yeah.
When it appears in front of you, you make the best of it.
So what would be an example of something they would have surprised you with?
Like bring you to a beach and making it, like, you know, firing into water, making up sand dunes, something like that, like sprint sessions, like, you know, battle PT sessions, carrying kit, on combat sessions where one of my friends was a karate head and I was kung fu, and he'd bring me over to the gym and kick the shit out of me basically for an hour, which is, you know, it just builds that intensity for you. So and it builds a self-belief in your ability to deal with stuff that you mightn't be ready for.
Yeah.
You know, like you won't get it perfect, but you'll give yourself a place where you can give yourself enough space that you can deal with the initial shock of it. And then, and once you get comfortable, but be able to move on with it then.
Yeah.
And that's all you can do. So what you're doing is you're taking the shock out of all these stresses, all these fears.
Yeah.
And then when you've taken that out of it, you're absolutely bulletproof.
Yeah.
You know, you won't struggle as much.
Yeah. It's almost like that cold water shock when it hits your body, isn't it? You just have to accept it.
And that's it. And once your body relaxes, then you're fine.
Yeah.
Like, as you know from cold water stuff, it's the same for anything you take on, I believe.
So how long was there between your first attempt and going back for the second?
7 years. So I was pretty scared.
Yeah.
So
and there's also maturity.
There's a few things came on, and life got in the way. I did some other stuff, you know, career-wise and personal stuff. But I suppose a big catalyst for me was my father passed away the year before I went on selection, and again he was an old soldier, and like I was kind of thinking, like, when am I actually going to do this? Like I've been kind of training for it ish for so long. I've been putting it off. So that was my catalyst. So like my why, or my reason for doing it, it was created then. Okay, why am I doing this? Am I doing this because I want to test myself and do something? No, I'm doing this because this is the life I want. And I want it more than all the things that are going to be in my way.
Yeah.
So that's what I built it from then. And then when you have that vision, when you have that in your head or your back pocket, excuse me, where it's the bigger voice in your head, then all the stuff that's hard, you'll get through it.
Yeah.
You will. You'll get over it, under it, through it, around it. You'll get lifted over by somebody, whatever you have to do. But you have to give meaning to what you're doing, and it has to be the most important thing. And I did that.
Yeah.
And I was a different person. I wasn't as fit on the second course as the first. I was 7 years older. But emotionally, psychologically, grit, mindset, I was very, very kind of structured.
Did you know all the way through that you were getting through it the second time around? No doubt.
No doubt. No, it was really tough. There was, you know, you go to dark places, you question why you're doing it. This is why I always bang on about the why. If your why is good enough, that dark place has a little torch in it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
If you
and
don't.
we see a snippet of it on the TV show. Because for anybody that's watching from outside Ireland, you've been the chief, what's it called?
Yeah,
the chief
instructor,
instructor.
On a Special Forces program. So we simulate Special Forces training with civilians, you know, sports stars, whatever.
So we see a snippet of it.
You get a week of it.
The real selection lasts how long?
Yeah, nowadays the current kind of application of it is 11 months and 2 weeks. Yeah, so no, don't get me wrong, it's not that intensity all the time.
Yeah.
But it's not far off it most of the time. So it goes up and down. So the failure rate is about 90%. You know, it's not about do people who are fitter get through it? No. People who know they are. People who know what they want. They know their limits. They know how to get up to their limits and even beyond them a little bit.
Yeah.
That's the people who get through.
Yeah, the TV show has been brilliant. And it's been brilliant to see a snapshot of it, because as somebody just watching it, you see the different personalities and you see the people that have prepared really well or that are really strong, and then you see the people that come in, maybe they're kind of peacocks and they're the lingo and the buzzwords and all that kind of stuff, and then you see the quiet people. Like one of the people that really impressed me on it was Peter Stringer, who was very quiet as he worked through it, but there was a real determination.
He's an iron will, and like that's what you need. If you have that iron will and you build that grit, like there's very little will stop you.
And did you, when you were putting recruits through selection, when you were part of the Ranger wing, did you get good at spotting who you thought would make it, or is it difficult to call?
It is, Donald, and I've been asked this question before. I've heard other special forces guys say, "Yeah, I can see this, I can see that." You get a couple of signs from people, but like you don't know what's going to happen. So what I would do, like the first 24, 48 hours. You get a kind of a snapshot of somebody and where they're at, maybe, and you have a little idea about it. But you give yourself, when you get smarter, the scope to kind of, that might go up or down or whatever, because someone looks fantastic in one phase of a course, and then the next thing they'll fail or they'll give up or whatever. You can't tell what's going on behind someone's eyes. Like, you can see things, but for me, there's no concrete evidence. So people can surprise you. And that's what I love about it. I remember when we started filming the first one, the executive producer was saying to me, like, the first day they were all getting arriving, and this is our first time doing this now. He wasn't sure what was going to happen, and I wasn't either, but I didn't want to tell him that. But I did. He said, "Look, on day 3, we'll have this many on day 5. And I said, "Jamie, this could be over in 10 minutes. The whole album could pack up." And he was going, "Oh, Jesus, don't say that to me. I need 6 episodes for RT. So that's where we went with it. But that's the beauty of it, that unknown. And once you embrace that unknown, that kind of factor that you can't actually control, like it absolutely is empowering. Like, no matter what you're doing in your life, whatever your business is or your pastimes or your challenges.
So when you think about where you were actually deployed and when you had to apply what was very intense training, were you prepared for actually some of the situations that you found yourself in professionally? Yeah,
as prepared as I could be, because obviously you have, training for something and the match are two different things, because the intensity goes right up. And I remember being in a deployment, and I mentioned it a few times, in the most physical and emotional experience I've ever had. That physical mental connection was in a jungle environment where we had to make this trek overnight in a jungle environment where if anybody knows, you don't walk in the jungle at night, but we had to because of this mission. And like, it was absolutely horrendous because it was all mountainous. And only then in that moment, I realized why selection for Special Forces has to be so tough, because you have to pressure test your individuals, because whatever your process is, whatever your business, whatever your mission, doesn't matter. It's your people carry it out. And that's what you have to do. So I realized why I had to be so tough, because, if I had the option on that operation that night, I'd quit and went home.
There's no turning back though.
There isn't. Like, there was five other guys with me, and like, I had to support them. And that's where a big part of it comes from as well. Like, people think Special Forces are built from, disco muscles and push-ups and blowing things up. It's actually not. It's the vulnerability of that team, as in your own personal weaknesses, vulnerabilities are supported by the rest of the team. Once you're open about them with your team and yourself, then you can make them a strength, because something that that catches you and you're constantly worried about, then get into it. Don't be afraid of it. Get into it. It's the only way you're going to get better, is getting into it as much as you can.
You talked a lot, because we did some work together a couple of years ago, and you talked a lot about fear and how you manage fear. So when you think back on the career, what were the most frightening moments where you really had to center yourself and manage that?
Do you know what? The biggest fear for me, right, strange enough, was never mortal fear. It was never about getting hurt or even getting killed. You just deal with that. It comes with the job, right? The biggest fear for me was letting people down. My team, my unit, So that was always the biggest fear. And it wasn't just me. Most of the guys I worked with, that was the biggest thing, because like, you become part of something that's bigger than you are. And like, that lifts you much further. So your fear factor for yourself is almost eliminated. But the thought of one of your friends being injured or hurt, that's a different kettle of fish, And it's almost a vulnerability which you work on because you get used to it. But the whole fear thing is like, it's not that you lack fear. You can't. It's impossible. Fear is okay. Like, it's actually a good thing within reason. It keeps you focused, it keeps you sharp. So be aware of it and, embrace it, but control it, manage it. You can do that. Like, you can do that.
Yeah.
You can do it.
So coming back to, I suppose, careers and skill acquisition and all that kind of stuff, obviously you moved on from the military and you're now a bit of a TV personality around the place. It's got to be weird, isn't it, spending the first part of your career in the shadows and the second part taking selfies? Like, what's that like?
Yeah. Where does that go? Yeah, I know. Yeah, look, from Taliban to Instagram. There you go. Yeah. It's look, that's probably, look, fear comes in loads of ways, and I'd probably be, I'd be more kind of comfortable in environments where other people would be afraid, the likes of, working in Afghanistan and all these places, because it's not that it suits me. I'm not a war junkie. I'm not into that stuff at all. I'm actually quite, kind of calm about bits and pieces, but it's the people you're with creates that environment for you. And I always felt very comfortable with the people I was with in my professional career. So no matter what's happening outside you, you can deal with it. Whereas coming into the world then where, I was launched out of the closet by RT and everybody else, which I'd be honest, like, I was reluctant to do it. And people probably think that's funny now because I'm on TV, 5 series into Hell Week, a book and whatever else I'm doing. I'm still not comfortable with it. But that's a good thing.
Yeah.
Because it'll always give me a little bit of an edge where I'm nervous about it because it's not my natural kind of thing. I don't like, people might think, I'm very confident and I'm very this and I'm that. It's not that I am. It's just that I'll take the fear out of it as best as I can because, I'm used to dealing with stuff I'm not comfortable doing. And it's my career thing. And like, that transfers to anything, not just mortal fear stuff. Like, I worked in the fashion industry for a year, for God's sake. Like, what the hell? Like, you know me?
Yeah.
So,
and are you enjoying this part of the career?
I do. I love it. I tell you, what I love about it is the different people I meet because, like when I worked in the military and even in private security, it's the particular type of person you're meeting a lot, or, the same kind of caliber of guy. Whereas with this now, I get to work with sports teams. I get to work with prisoners, in around the country in different kind of programs. I work with school children about stress, about dealing with, mindset and coping techniques and stuff like that. So like, I love that variety of people because you learn something new all the time. Even though you're the person going in giving the talk, like the way it rolls, and I love having that kind of fluidity about it, that whatever direction it takes, you go with it because you get so much more out of people then when you give them, the kind of a bit of autonomy to do whatever they're doing in their training or whatever. And like, you'll always get great stuff back, especially from like kids and young people. Like, it's fantastic.
Yeah. And your training company now, is it mostly talking to, like you say, to kids or to businesses, or are you doing some stuff are you doing team building stuff to bring people out and torture them?
Yeah, I still have to have that torture bit going on. That has to work as well, yeah. I get my fix out of that then. So, yeah, I do a bit of that too, yeah. Yeah, with some professional sports teams, yeah. And
like, when you look at the average group of people that you bring out or that you put into these situations, I wonder about context. How many of us that haven't been in those situations can thrive and survive in them? Or, do you think it's a little bit like the nature versus nurture question? Is it, how many, if you take a group of 20 or 30 or 50 people that have never been in any of those kind of survival situations, is there always going to be a percentage of them that are going to thrive and rise to the challenge? Or,
like, I think it's quite varied. Like, I suppose, again, it comes down to people. And again, it's not the fittest person or the strongest or the smartest. I think it's the person who understands themselves the best. They know their vulnerabilities. They know their weaknesses, obviously, and their strengths as well. So, like, they're relatively comfortable with that and they accept that, which is more important. They're aware of it and they accept it. And those are the kind of people that excel in any sort of environment or stress because they actually know where it'll be tight for them, where it'll be better, like, it's not going to last forever, it'll go whatever way. But like, I find that's the kind of person who makes it through like a Hell Week or these events I do with people.
Yeah.
Doesn't always, like, sometimes the loudest person or the person that's the fittest or the person who comes out to the fore first isn't always the person who gets through it. Like,
And that it all comes back to that grit piece, isn't it? And that just determination to keep going, no matter how hard how hard it feels.
Suffer in silence. That's what they used to say in the Ranger.
Absolutely. So what's next for you? What's coming up in the near future? What are you excited about?
There's a few things maybe. There's a few projects. Kind of maybe some more book stuff. More
the book
TV.
was brilliant, by the way. I have to say, I read it, I read it when it was brand new, and it was absolutely brilliant. It came across as just really genuine, and it was a really good read, actually.
Yeah, look, I wrote it the way it happened and the way I thought about it, so yeah, because like I wasn't going to write a book about, some war book. Like you get fellas in US Special Forces and UK would dime a dozen for those. Like you can have all the shootouts you want. But like I wanted something that was more kind of real. And like it's not about being like Superman or Superwoman or being the best. It's about being your best and doing your best whenever you get a chance to do it.
Yeah. What was the process like for writing that?
It was actually straightforward enough. Obviously, I had to corroborate a few things with different people, get a few permissions here and there, realize what I couldn't put in, what I could. But I actually wrote it in like 6 weeks or something like that.
Really?
Because if you think of it, like, I was nominated for some book award and I was meeting some other writers that I would call proper writers who write real books. And I remember talking to this lady who was, best-selling author, 3 or 4 bestsellers to her name and, writing these fantastic books. And she asked me that question, what was your process? I said, well, I just kind of sat down. I wrote down the top 10 things I wanted in the book and where that happened to me, in a chronological order. And she said, how long did it take? And I said, 6 weeks. And she nearly died. Like she said, it was 3 years from my process. Like. But she's researching, she's bringing stuff in. Everything I did, I saw it or I felt it happened to me. So it's easy to do that then.
Yeah.
I found it very kind of empowering sort of activity as well. I didn't realize I'd get as much over personally by doing it over the 6 weeks. I wrote the book. My company and the book, I did them all in the same 6 weeks, from 20 to 21, December 20 to January 21. So got the company stood up and wrote the book in 6 weeks.
So listen, it's been a fantastic story so far, and I really appreciate you coming in and having a chat with us, because I think one of the things, the first time I spoke with you, the first time we met, I suppose the difference from the TV persona, putting people through their paces, to, I just find you to be very insightful in terms of the human psyche and how we approach challenges and how we get through things. So I really appreciate you coming in and doing this, and looking forward to seeing what you get up to over the next while. Hopefully there'll be another series of the show as well. So
we might do a kind of a mixed one, Hell Week meets Love Island or something like that. Let's see.
That would certainly get the viewers. Ray Goggins, thanks a million.
Thanks, Donald.
It was great hearing from Ray. To find out more about him, you can follow him on Instagram @Goggins_Ray. And if you enjoyed the podcast, please follow us on Instagram and subscribe to our YouTube @TalentMatters_podcast.